Welcome to your daily dose of sci-fi adventures. New stories dropped every single day. Smash that subscribe button and ring the to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and unlock even more epic cosmic tales. Rain lashed against the soaring glass spires of the citadel of Ushra, each drop a crystal dagger. Below, the air thrummed with anticipation and scorn. 1,000 pairs of alien eyes glimmered in the vaulted halls, the opaline Nidavarians, with their sinuous necks curved in aristocratic disdain. The hulking Vordrak, whose arm plates clanked in amusement. The luminescent Katrax, whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed in contemptuous delight. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, drawn by a single spectacle, the unveiling of Earth's contribution to the Grand Coalition. At the heart of the Great Forum, day's lights carved through mist, spotlighting a lone human girl whose silhouette seemed almost too slender to fill the space. 14 years old or so, she claimed. Mara Thorne stood barefoot upon the polished obsidian floor. Her once white shirt was now stained slate gray, her trousers scuffed and patched in half a dozen places. A thin chain of copper wire, crudely fashioned into a bracelet, circled her wrist. Her hair, oily and tangled, fell in uneven strands around a face streaked with grime. Yet her stance was unwavering, chin tilted upward, hands curled into fists. At her sides, the Cosmiarch, the Citadel's autocratic ruler, emerged from the shadows on the days above her, clad in an iridescent robe that shimmered between violet and midnight blue. He surveyed Mara with a cold smile. His voice, amplified by whisper speakers embedded in the rafters, rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. "Behold," he intoned, "the champion of Sol Prime, a savage novelty, untrained, undisciplined, and utterly, let us say, unschooled in the finer arts of interstellar science." The assembled delegates laughed, a burst of discordant notes, rich with superiority. Mara's heart pounded, but she did not flinch. In her mind flickered the memory of Earth's ruin, the smoke-choked skies over New Arcadia, the screams echoing through collapsed tunnels, the taste of ash on her tongue. She remembered the moment when the alien warships had arrived, their weapons stripping entire cities from existence in seconds, leaving only smoking debris and hollow shells. Her parents gone, her brother nowhere to be found. She'd escaped, scavenging through the dead streets to find scraps of technology. That was where she'd learned to listen to machines, feel their wounded parts, coax their dying circuits back to life. She had no academy diploma. Her diploma was fire and desperation. Above her, council engineers unfurled a heavy curtain. Wisps of violet smoke curled away to reveal the prize, a war machine unlike any on Earth, over from meters tall, sculpted from a black alloy that seemed to drink in ambient light. It stood like a silent sentinel. Strange glyphs etched along its limbs pulsed with dormant energy. At its chest lay a shattered quantum core, the crystalline shards jutting like fractured teeth. Council technicians hovered around it, muttering in technical registers so convoluted that even Martian translators balked. A hulking engineer, a lanky, six-armed Krell, bent to examine the damage. He tapped its side plating with a sensory probe. "The feedback loops are fried. The power matrix is unstable. No terrestrial engineer could recalibrate this in under a year." His voice held genuine bewilderment. The Cosmiarch grinned wider. "Yet we will give this savage child a chance. Fix it, Mara Thorne, or prove yourself as ill-suited to our sublime coalition as we suspect." Gasps and chuckles spiked across the crowd. A Dautak noble's tendrils quivered with laughter. A pair of Yilak's twins clapped their hands in mocking applause. A human ambassador, head of Earth's reluctant delegation, shifted uncomfortably. He had pleaded for better preparation, insisted on sending his finest engineers, but the Council, in its infinitor, so it believed, infinite arrogance, had dismissed them all. Instead, Earth had chosen her, a wild card, a symbol of humanity's rumored primal ingenuity. Mara's pulse drummed in her ears. A panel of judges sat on the dais behind the Cosmiarch, ancient beings whose eyes glowed with authority. Their mandates were simple. If the machine sprang to life, Earth would gain limited admission into the coalition. If not, well, the galaxy would see fit to determine Earth's fate. She drew a ragged breath and strode forward. Each footstep sent a soft echo across the marbled floor. Council engineers sprang to intercept her, brandishing plasma spanners and zero-point wrenches. But Mara raised a hand. "Stand down," she said, voice surprisingly calm. "I don't need your toys." They paused, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Mara pulled from her belt pouch a knotted spool of conductive tape, Earth's version of duct tape, along with several bits of scavenged cooling gel and a single shipped Auroran crystal she had pocketed from a derelict refugee ship. The Council's lead technical officer sneered. "Primitive tools for a primitive mind," he muttered. Mara knelt beside the war machine. She placed the crystal shard against the jagged edge of the core's fracture, listening to the soft hum as the lattice structure hummed in response. Her fingers traced the broken conduits, noting the crackling residues of antimatter pulses. She dabbed coolant gel into the fissures, watching it sizzle and harden into a transparent blue bond. Then she wrapped the tape around the melded seam, pressing until she felt the crystal settle into the heart of the machine's power node. Gasps rippled through the forum. Some diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. This was no mere show. The machine's glyphs flared, runes blazing like living fire. The ambient light flickered, as though drawn toward the core's sudden brightness. Council technicians scrambled back, eyes wide. Mara stood, stepping away from the machine. She wiped a smear of sweat and grease from her brow. In that moment, the jeers and laughter dissolved into pin-drop silence. Only the raw hum of the war machine filled the hall, a promise of unleashed power. The Cosmiarch leaned forward, voice low but trembling with excitement. "Proceed," he said. Mara lifted her hand and touched a small lever embedded in the machine's forearm. Sparks danced along the alloy, and the core roared to life. Pistons pumped fluidly, hydraulic joints clicked into synchronization. It took a moment, long enough for the entire galaxy's delegates to hold their breath, before the war machine flexed its arms and emitted a resonant chord that vibrated in every chest. A tidal wave of stolen conquest threatened the Citadel walls, yet it stood still, awaiting its master's command. The Cosmiarch's jaw slacked. The judges blinked their bioluminescent eyes in unison. Mara, panting, met each stunned gaze in turn. The mockery had ended. The real trial was just beginning. Mara's fingers trembled only once as she reached for the side panel of the war machine. The polished alloy was ice cold under her fingertips, yet she felt more heat in the sudden pressure of 1,000 alien eyes upon her back than in the furnace of a star. Around her, the Council's engineers clustered like vultures, hovering servilely at first, then recoiling as she pried the panel free with nothing but raw strength and a stolen Auroran spanner. A hiss of escaping coolant fogged the air, and trembling curtains of iridescent mist. Beneath the outer shell lay a labyrinth of filaments, conduits, and crystalline matrices, an architecture at once elegant and terrifying. The shattered core had shattered not along a clean fault, but in a fractal cascade, shards radiating like the spokes of a broken wheel, each fragment pulsed with latent energy. Hovering in mirrored suspension, the machine's heat sinks were scorched black, its flux stabilizers twisted like molten reeds. Council engineers murmured diagnostics. Quantum resonance off by 3 7/10. Supercooled antimatter coil disintegrated. Biosymbiont feed loop ruptured. Mara crouched, her boots scraping the alloy floor. She selected first the Auroran crystal shard she'd rescued from the refugee vessel, its facets chipped, but its lattice pure. Holding it aloft, she whispered a memory of her father's workshop back on the ravaged colonies. The smell of solder, the hum of power surges, the way he'd taught her to listen to machines when they whispered in frequencies no ear should. Here she pressed the crystal into the core's fracture, and it glowed with quicksilver light, casting dancing reflections across the concave walls of the forum. Behind her, the Cosmiarch leaned forward, his jeweled scepter forgotten in his lap. "What trick is this?" he demanded. "An alien crystal in an alien core. Surely you breached some sacred protocol." Mara ignored him, dipping her fingers into a vial of self-bonding coolant gel scavenged from wrecked war droids. She applied it like mortar between the shards, watching it bubble and harden into a translucent seal. Steam hissed and plumes of energy coalesced into soft pulses. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat, stronger, steadier. A Council technician dared to approach, wrench primed. "Step back, girl. You're destabilizing the harmonics." Mara half turned, her eyes bright. "I know what I'm doing," she snapped. "Your holowrenches only dull the edges. Real repair needs faith in the materials." She slipped the holowrench from his grip, drawing it around the panel and snapping a connector back into place with the crack of real torque. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The forum, vast and echoing, held its breath. Then at first softly, like the first notes of a distant anthem, the war machine's core thrummed. Lines of cerulean energy snaked along its chassis. Hydraulic limbs clicked into place, flexing as if awakened from centuries of slumber. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The hulking Vordrik engineer stumbled backward, knocking over a cluster of datapads. Crystal columns chimed as they registered the sudden charge surge. Lights flickered. Mara swiped her sleeve across her brow and crouched again by the intake vent. She found the feed loop an impossibly fine mesh of carbon diamond weave that had been torn apart. By the initial explosion, no earthly fiber matched its resilience, and no alien engineer had dared touch it since. The Council's own protocols called for a full replacement at 2-year build time minimum. But Mara had something Earth had in abundance: desperation. She peeled back a scrap of her grease-stained shirt, revealing the braided copper wire bracelet on her wrist. The wire was brittle, salvaged from scorched power lines in New Arcadia, its insulation eaten away by solar storms. Gently, she wove the strands into a tight lattice, fusing them with flux paste to form a makeshift support mesh. She pressed it into place, bridging the gash in the feed loop. Sparks erupted, and she flinched yet held firm, sealing the bond with a final dollop of gel. The core flared. The war machine's viewport lenses glowed red, then blue, then a steady pure white. Smoke curled from vents as the coolant system cycled. The machine rumbled a sound like distant thunder and lifted one armored foot. Stamping against the dazed Council guards recoiled. The Cosmiarch rose, cloak billowing. "By the ancients, she's damned well alive," his voice cracked with awe. Mara scrambled back to the front, chest heaving. Above her, the judge's bioluminescent eyes glowed brighter. Shifting from inscrutable evaluation to a spark of wonder, she met their gaze, felt the weight of every stereotype they'd heaped on her shoulders: primitive, uneducated, savage. Now they saw how wrong they were. With a swift motion, she activated the command interface, a crystalline pad that slid from the machine's forearm. She tapped sequences derived from stolen war logs and broken droid minds, improvising calibration. Codes on the fly. The canopy hissed shut, cementing her in a cocoon of humming machinery. A surge of data flooded her neural interface: schematics of star-destroying railguns, coordinates of hidden armories, the war machine's psychological warfare protocols. Alone with the machine's mind, she felt its power seethe an alien will, shaped for conquest. It tested her, sending jolts through her neural link. Pain. Then images, battlefields strewn with shattered cities, innocence swept away. Rage welled in her chest. She tightened her grip on the control handles. Instead of obeying its martial directives, she routed core power into the shield generators. The forum's overhead energy turrets clicked to target her plasma bolts, arcing toward the canopy. Mara engaged the shields. Transparent waves of force coalesced outside the windows, and the first bolt hit with a muffled thump, steam bursting around it. Council soldiers shouted, retreating behind columns. Technicians fumbled at their consoles, eyes wide. The Cosmiarch pounded his podium. "Cease fire," he bellowed. "Cease fire, or I will have you disintegrated." Mara keyed in one final override. The war machine's arms retracted, then extended. Skyward, its turret mount whirring into position. But instead of unleashing death, it fired a concentrated pulse of electromagnetic stabilization at the days, dancing through the etched runes and rendering them inert. The Cosmiarch's scepter sparked and went dead. Silence fell again, more profound than before. Mara stepped from the cockpit, boots clanking against the alloy. She knelt by the control console and placed a hand over the crystalline pad. "Your arrogance nearly destroyed you," she said, voice echoing. "You thought a savage child could only bring ruin, but I have brought you a repaired machine, one rebuilt for peace." The Cosmiarch's eyes, once proud like twin stars, flickered uncertainly. Round her, the council stirred as if waking. from a dream, and Mara Thorne stood at the center of it all, heart-pounding, knowing that the galaxy's fate now hinged on what she would do next. Alarms blared through the vaulted halls of the Great Forum, a cacophony of klaxons and high-pitched warning tones that drowned out even the hum of the newly awakened war machine. Red lights flashed along the crystalline pillars, casting the assembly chamber in streaks of panic. Mara Thorne's chest tightened as she peered through the cockpit canopy. Council guards in shining armor sprinted toward the machine, plasma rifles raised. The Cosmiarch's voice boomed from the daze in ragged urgency. Hostile action. Arrest that child and her abomination. Mara's fingers flew over the war machine's control pads, routing power to the magnetic deflector shields outside. Bolts of turquoise plasma arced in, melting stone where they hit. Each impact sent shockwaves rattling through the hull. She grit her teeth and engaged the secondary field matrix. A shimmering bubble enveloped the machine, neutralizing the incoming fire. Sparks fizzled against the invisible barrier, and the guards stumbled back in confusion and fear. Deploy support. Drones, one of the council engineers barked into a neck mic. Moments later, a swarm of sleek, six-legged automata scuttled from concealed alcoves in the arena floor. They clattered toward the war machine, their multi-purpose arms extending. Like insectal pincers, Mara recognized their function. These drones had been designed to dismantle derelict vessels, not to kill but in numbers. Even a non-lethal swarm could immobilize her. She gritted her teeth, slammed her foot to the pedal, and sent a pulse through the cavernous arena floor. The machine's hydraulic limbs stomped once. Twice the echo thundered like an earthquake, and the heavy impact pulse disrupted the drones. Gyrosensors. They toppled over, legs spinning uselessly, then lay still as the pulse reverberated. Through their chassis, silence fell as the smoke from the pulses cleared. The only sound was the low, steady thrum of the war machine's core. Across the chamber, the Cosmiarch stared in disbelief, his robes singed by stray bolts. Around him, delegates exchanged frantic whispers. They had expected failure, not this raw display of power and control. Mara took a cautious step out of the cockpit, the machine's doors sliding open with a pneumatic hiss. She could feel every eye on her, the Bavarian's eyes narrowing, the Vordruk's maw gaping, the K-Trax's bioluminescent patterns dimming in shock. The air tasted of ozone and hot metal. She knelt on one knee before the daze, placing a gauntleted hand on the floor plate, a gesture of both deference and challenge. Council of Ashra, she called out, voice unnervingly steady amidst the tension. Your fear is justified. This machine can tear worlds apart, but it need not. It can also build, protect, and illuminate. You see only your past wars. I see our shared future. A silence so profound it seemed to swallow sound swept the forum. The Cosmiarch stood, raising his scepter, but his voice lacked its earlier thunder. You dare lecture the council that nearly consigned your world to oblivion, not lecture. Mara replied, I offer a choice. She rose to her feet. You can continue your cycle of conquest, arming planets against each other, snuffing out entire cultures at a twirl of your finger, or you can repurpose what you have. This war machine need not be a harbinger of death. Under human hands, it can be a forge of life. A murmur rippled through the assembled races. The judge, whose bioluminescent eyes had remained unreadable, now blinked in contemplation. One of the senior engineers, a Krell with metallic tattoos, stepped forward. Human child. He rasped, voice wavering. We have poured centuries of research into preventing misuse of this technology. How do we know you will not turn it against us? Mara held his gaze. Because I repair what is broken, not destroy. I have lost everything to your war machines, my family, my home. I would sooner use this power to heal than harm. If you doubt me, then prove it. Let me transform this citadel's arsenal into tools. For rebuilding, let me guide you in reconfiguration. Or silence me now and live with the knowledge that you rejected peace in favor of fear. A tense beat, then another. The Cosmiarch closed his eyes as if weighing unseen scales. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. What would you have us do, human? Mara exhaled. She turned to the control console at the war machine's side and tapped a sequence. Holographic schematics bloomed in mid-air, diagrams of the machines. Armaments rerouted into industrial fabricators. conceptual blueprints for converting plasma cannons into starship welders, magnetic railguns into mass driver launch systems for terraforming nanets. First, she said, we clear this hall of weapons and drones. Then we begin conversion. She flipped another lever. From hidden compartments along the machines, shoulders, specialized tool heads, and fabric-weld nozzles slid into place, replacing the lethal barrels. The audience gasped as tiny robotic arms emerged, each one shittering to life with calibration routines. Within moments, the war machine had begun retooling the Council's stockpile of arms, shrinking high-yield grenades into nutrient pellet dispersers, reprogramming projectile cannons into rapid deployment seed planting arrays. The great vats of plasma were recharged with stabilized polymer feeds for habitat construction, not incineration. Mara worked with fierce precision, her fingers dancing over touchpads, her voice issuing calm directives. Council technicians hesitated, then stepped forward, drawn by curiosity and the undeniable logic of her approach. A dozen engineers formed a ring around her, assisting removing parts, feeding replacement modules, marveling as the machine reshaped their instruments of war into instruments of creation. As the last plasma emitter clicked offline and was replaced by a compact Starforge nozzle, the hall erupted not in the mocking laughter of before, but in a crescendo of astonished applause. Delegates wept. Some knelt to touch the newly minted tools. The Cosmiarch lowered his head, a single tear catching the wavering torchlight. Mara straightened, brushing soot from her sleeve. This is only the beginning, she said softly. Weapons end wars. Tools end suffering. I invite you to join me. Before anyone could respond, a low tremor shook the forum. The great doors at the far end crashed open. Outside, the Citadel's turrets, still under manual override, swiveled to target the building. Dozens of high-caliber beams lanced through the sky-blue windows, tearing columns from the ceiling and sending stone and crystal crashing. The Cosmiarch's personal guard shielded him as debris rained down. Mara's heart froze. Get that remote override, she shouted. Technicians scrambled to holographic panels embedded in the walls, fingers dancing over glyphic runes. The war machine pivoted, its newly minted nozzles retracting as its servos whined in protest. It raised a massive armored arm and slammed it into the pillar housing the turret controls. A resonant crack echoed like a rifle shot. The turrets above stuttered and fell inert. Silence returned. Dust settled. The Cosmiarch, shaken but alive, stared at the fallen turret controls, then at Mara. You saved us, he said hoarsely, and now you protect us. Mara laid a hand on the console. Not protect, she corrected. Empower. We protect ourselves when we build, not when we destroy. A new coalition formed in that shattered hall, not of conquerors and vassals, but of partners in creation. As the rescued delegates helped clear rubble and begin emergency repairs, Mara Thorne stood at the center, a symbol of what one human girl, scorned and underestimated, could achieve with ingenuity, courage, and an unbreakable will. The galaxy had witnessed her savage reckoning and found itself forever changed. The aftermath of the upheaval in the Great Forum felt like waking from a fevered dream. Dawn's pale light filtered through cracked crystalline windows, casting fractured rainbows across the rubble-strewn floor. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy, once rivals, now co-conspirators in creation, moved with renewed purpose, salvaging tools and distributing raw materials. Where weapons had littered the aisles, now lay seed pods, habitat schematics, and repair drones. Buzzing through the air like industrious insects, at the center of it all stood Mara Thorne, her once grimy clothes now marked by streaks of fresh coolant and welding residue. The war machine, no longer a weapon of war, but a colossal mobile fabrication unit, loitered just beyond the days, its new armaments whirring softly as they processed scavenged ore into construction. Alloys, Council engineers hovered nearby, marveling at the machine's seamless shift from destruction to construction. The Cosmiarch approached Mara, his robe torn at the shoulder, one sleeve singed. He carried himself with less of his old imperious sweep. Each step was measured, almost hesitant. He stopped before her, lowering his weight to the level of her gaze. Technarch Thorne, he began, voice laced with both deference and awe. You have shown us a path we feared to tread, that power need not be wielded to dominate. The Council of Ashra is in your debt. Mara's jaw ached from days of clenched resolve, but she managed a small, tired smile. I did not act alone. These hands guided the machine. Yes, but it was your engineers and soldiers who picked up the tools of peace. True power lies in unity. Behind them, the senior judge with the glowing bioluminescent eyes stepped forward. She carried an ancient staff carved from asteroid ore, its crystalline tip pulsing in time with her heartbeats. By decree of the Council's founding oath, the judge intoned, and in recognition of unparalleled service to galactic harmony, we hereby induct Earth as a founding member of the Grand Coalition, and we elevate Mara Thorne to the title of High Technarch of the Citadel, guardian of both creation and cooperation. A ripple of cheering rose through the hall. Vordric warlords lowered their helmets to Mara in salute. Avarian diplomats bowed. Necks in respect. Katrax tendrils glowed in celebratory patterns. Even the human ambassador, once anxious and reluctant, stepped forward to shake Mara's hand. Eyes shining with pride, Mara bowed her head. I accept this honor, she said, voice steady. But I ask only one thing, that every species represented here dedicate at least 1% of its war budgets to reconstructing worlds. We will build schools on refuge planets, launch orbital farms for famine-stricken systems, and heal the scars of centuries of conflict. Silence fell as the delegates contemplated her words. Then, one by one, they nodded. A roar of approval filled the forum, echoing off fractured pillars and splintered pedestals. Outside, the repurposed turrets no longer tracked targets, but worked in tandem to seal breaches in the Citadel's walls. Mara walked through the hallways, flanked by a small entourage of engineers, soldiers turned builders, and curious delegates. She paused at an observation deck overlooking the lower levels, and watched as the war machine's fabrication arms assembled. Modular habitat pods, each designed to shelter displaced civilians. A small boy, wide-eyed and clutching a toy drone, tugged at Mara's sleeve. Lady Technarch, he whispered. Will there still be wars? Mara knelt, placing him on her knee. She brushed a streak of soot from his cheek and looked out at the work unfolding beneath them. Not if we remember today, she said softly. We turn our tools toward life, not death. But we must remain vigilant. Peace is not a gift, it's something we build day by day. The boy nodded solemnly, and Mara rose, setting him gently aside. She felt the weight of her new office settle on her shoulders like a mantle, but it was not a burden. It was a promise. In the weeks that followed, the Citadel became a hub of reconstruction. Mara oversaw council committees that traded starship blueprints for agricultural converters, retooled drone factories to spin out medical kits, and refitted orbital weapons platforms into debris collection nets that cleaned forgotten space lanes. Earth's engineers arrived in droves, bringing their makeshift ingenuity to complement alien precision. Together they founded the Ashra Institute of Technological Renaissance, an open academy where any species could teach and learn. On the first day of the Institute's inaugural term, Mara Thorne stood before an amphitheater of students, humans, Krell, Dautak, Vordruk, and more. In the sky above them soared the once feared war machine, now renamed the Aegis of Renewal, its arms gently guiding a newly formed starship undergoing construction. Mara raised her voice, carrying it to every corner of the plaza. We were told that a savage girl would fail. We were told that Earth's children knew nothing but ruin. Today, we proved them wrong. Remember, there is no machine beyond repair, no heart beyond redemption. Today, we build the future together. A cheer erupted, and as the assembled throng raised their voices in agreement, Mara felt a thrill of hope unlike any she had known. The galaxy's long night of war had ended, and although countless challenges lay ahead, she now led the dawn of a new order, one born not of fear and domination, but of collaboration, creativity, and the unbreakable spirit of a single human girl who refused to accept defeat.